There has been a report circulating that the Chargers are trying to trade Joshua Palmer, but I wouldn't believe everything you read on the internet because Justin Herbert needs more weapons, not less.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Njoku. And we've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. And to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, apparently there are some whispers out there that the Chargers may be interested in trading Joshua Palmer, but why would they do that? Why would they trade the longest tenured wide receiver in their group when it's clear they need more weapons, not less? And speaking of adding more weapons, the trade deadline is right around the corner, Tuesday of next week, and we still want the Chargers to go get another weapon for Justin Herbert. But unfortunately, the options are very limited. And the Chargers, man, they really lucked out getting Kristian Fulton. He has been fantastic. Has he done enough to make sure he is a part of the Chargers in 2025 and beyond?
And I think his health is going to have, a huge part to do with that. It's got to be able to stay on the field and finish these games. But this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. David, it is a Chargers mailbag day, and we had several questions about a report that came out from Sportskeeda's Tony Pauline that was about a trade for Josh Palmer, which is, I think, where this Chris Saez post comes from, asking, what are your thoughts on the Chargers wanting to trade Josh Palmer? If they do trade him, what are the best replacement options out there still? So, first of all, it's hard to know how much, veracity there is to this. This is a guy that has a lot of followers. Sportskeeda, his site has almost 60,000. He has 45,000 himself. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true, though, right? This is the only person I've seen saying anything about this at all. So I'd say take it with a huge grain of salt. This was the report. The Chargers are looking to replace Joshua Palmer, who is not in the team's long-term plans. Despite 2.5 solid seasons, there's a chance the Chargers attempt to trade Palmer. So he's saying that they're trying to upgrade over him. So trying to bring someone else in. If they bring someone else in, maybe he gets sent away, which at face value isn't crazy from the standpoint of he is on an expiring contract this year. With the involvement of him in the offense, it's hard to imagine he is technically or necessarily in the long-term plans for this team. At the same time, David, he is coming off of his best 2 games, 2 catches for 72 yards last week, 4 for 63 against Arizona. It does seem like he's starting to click in a little bit, but it's just hard to say, Justin Herbert without Joshua Palmer and them not getting something seems very unlikely to me.
Well, especially when you consider the contract's not a lot at all. It's very,
he's a third-round
very
pick.
cost. Yeah, he's still on his rookie contract, so money is not really a concern. And I feel like that chemistry that Justin Herbert and Joshua Palmer have, it's starting to show itself on the football field. They're starting to really target. Justin Herbert's trying to target him down the field, not in the short to in the intermediate. He's trying to rip off big chunks, 25, 30, 40 plus yards to Joshua Palmer. And, this is a guy that he clearly trusts that he's going to be where he says he's going to be. And whether or not he's in the future plans, the only way I can see this happening as far as him getting traded away is if they bring in somebody who's a legit number one who doesn't really need to have any time to get up to speed to make an impact, a guy that can step on the field and make an impact right away. And I don't know if those such guys are out there to make that happen.
It doesn't seem like it, and that's the other part of the question here from Chris Saez, which we're going to get to. But over the last 3 games, Joshua Palmer has averaged 21.6 yards per catch.
Big plays.
He's been an explosive player for this team over the last 3 weeks. It is only 8 catches, so it's a pretty small sample size. But we know that there is some chemistry there. He should have had a long touchdown last week. I'll give Justin Herbert a break because he had a defender on him as he threw that ball, and it's incredible that he still got it to Josh Palmer in that situation. But if he leads him there, it's a touchdown. It's a big-time touchdown from him. So I like Josh Palmer. I don't know how this team feels about him as far as their future plans, and it wouldn't be that crazy. I guess if you're saying, hey, they're going to trade for someone, and instead of potentially booting someone like a Brendan Rice or a Simi Fehoko off the roster, because we know there's going to be some movement there with DJ Chark basically having to come back this week, maybe they would, okay, hey, that spot, we'll trade Josh Palmer, we'll have a spot to bring in whoever that is. But whoever that is a big question, David, because there's really not a lot that's still left on the trade market after the Deontay Johnson trade. There's not a lot of moves that move the needle.
No, there is not. I mean, there's no big name guys out there. The Devontae Adams have already gone. You never had a chance at him anyway. Obviously, Deontay Johnson was traded
unless Devontae
today.
Adams gets traded again, but I still don't think the Chargers.
Highly doubtful. But I mean, as far as some realistic options, I think Darius Slayton still makes a ton of sense as a guy that can stretch the field and a guy who's coming off of a really strong performance and seems to be, kind of a deep threat that the Chargers want to have involved in their offense. And I think Mike Williams obviously comes to mind for a myriad of reasons we've already outlined multiple times. That still makes sense to me. And then the last guy is probably a little bit far-fetched, even at this point, but T. Higgins from the Bengals, they're 3-5 right now. And hey, they lose another game. Who knows? Put some pressure on them that Monday before the trade deadline. Say, hey, I'll offer you a fourth, whatever, and they might bite. Something aggressive. Obviously, I'm just throwing something out there.
Sure.
Necessarily that it's going to be a fourth-round pick, but I think those are really the only guys in my mind that have any kind of legitimate chance to be traded.
Yeah, the Bengals, I think, obviously have just enough, chances to, make a push this year that they wouldn't do it. Obviously, it seemed like they were taking offers in the offseason. But the other part of that comes along with it is, are you going to be willing to pay T. Higgins $30+ million or somewhere near that? Because he is by far going to be not only the best guy still available for trading this year, he's also going to be probably the number one wide receiver in the free agent market as well, which we'll talk about more later on. But yeah, it is the Mike Williams, it's the Darius Slaytons. I've seen Adam Thielen thrown around. I don't know if any of those guys move the needle, but hey, if you think you're between them and making a push to the playoffs is you adding that piece, and it's a day 3 pick, go for it. Try to add to this offense. Obviously, this offense needs help. And we just saw a team that's obviously really good in the AFC make a move, even with some guys that I would, like a Zay Flowers that they already have. With the Ravens trading for Deontay Johnson, basically a 5th and a 6th round pick swap is all it took for the Ravens. And current Joe Ortiz, their GM's mentor, Eric DaCosta over there, making a move that seems like something that would be exactly what the Chargers would want, right? Something that is going to help them potentially this year without costing them dramatic future draft capital.
Yeah, it's ridiculous here. I mean, we're talking about a 5th for Carolina, 6th round pick, and Deontay. I mean, come on now, like that's nothing. It's a 5th round and Deontay Johnson in exchange for a 6th round pick. I don't understand why you don't do that. Like that move makes way too much sense. That is nothing. The Chargers are going to have multiple comp picks probably in rounds 6 and 7 or later. I mean, I'm talking 3, maybe even 4, and it could be even before that. So like you're telling me you couldn't even just sent a pick away, not even exchanged one, and like that still wouldn't have hurt you in this situation. So I don't understand the logic. Maybe this just wasn't a personality or scheme fit from the Chargers perspective, because it's hard for me to believe, Daniel, that the Chargers did not offer that or something more substantial. If they didn't, they just weren't interested.
Yeah, and this is a trade I would have made. I would have taken whatever the red flags are, and I would have think it's worth a pick swap, especially with the compensatory picks that you have coming back your way. You're going to have chances on day 3 to get the guys that you want to get, or the chance to move around, to move up to get somebody with, potentially 3 compensatory picks next year. Yes, they have moved some of them around, and, Taylor Heineke, obviously Elijah Molden's a 2026 pick. But still, if you wanted him, if the Chargers really wanted Deontay Johnson, they could have beat that deal easily. So either they didn't really want him, right? Maybe they had concerns about, drops, or, just a guy that's gotten traded now twice in a span of like 6 months. We won't ever know that, right? But this is a dude who would have added some real juice to your wide receiver room, some real talent, and a dude who put up some pretty decent numbers with some really, really bad quarterbacks in Pittsburgh. This is a move I would have made. And now that you didn't, there's not really much left out there. Like you said, we've talked about the guys over and over again. Still, some of those guys can make sense. But yeah, I mean, the Chargers aren't a Deontay Johnson away from making a Super Bowl. But if a trade like this and a day 3 pick gives you a better chance to make the playoffs in 2024 and just give yourself a chance at the big dance, I think you have to do it. And who's to say that Joe Ortiz isn't going to do it? But there is a good question that one of our listeners brings up, which is maybe a receiving tight end makes more sense to the Chargers than a wide receiver. And there's some better names that are actually available, David, like an Evan Engram or potentially David Njoku. So we're going to talk about all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Okay, real talk. We've all been there, feeling like we're burning cash with those rent checks. It's frustrating, right? But here's the deal. Built Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Built. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month you pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now. And when you go to join built.com/LockedOnNFL, that's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you. Join built.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. David, let's continue getting into this Chargers mailbag as the NFL trade deadline ramps up. We are less than a week away from this happening, almost exactly a week yesterday. So wide receiver is always going to be the flashy name that's out there for the Chargers. And of course, they have a lot of young guys. It's an inexperienced room. They obviously have DJ Chark coming back, so that muddies things a little bit, but shouldn't stop them from trying to go get someone else, in my opinion. But maybe wide receiver isn't what they should be going for, David, which is, I think, why we get this voicemail here from Casey.
Hey, how's it going? This is Casey. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. Now, my question is, do you guys think that a pass-catching tight end like a David Njoku or an Evan Engram is a bigger need for this team right now than a wide receiver? I think so. What do you guys think? Thank you very much. Bolt up.
Thank you for the voicemail, Casey. I think it's a very legitimate question, and I think there's obviously arguments on both sides of it. Would I say it's more? I don't know. It depends who you're getting, right? I could tell you who would help more between two players, but between two positions, what I would say, though, is it's very close, and I absolutely think that a tight end, adding one, especially a pass-catching one that can be serviceable as a blocker, would really help. We know how much the tight ends have been a part of this offense. Look at the numbers that Will Dissly has been putting up as a blocking tight end, and that contract looks so good right now. Yeah. And you bring up a couple of guys that it would be hard not to get excited about. I think the availability of these guys is the bigger question here. But David, both of those guys would help in different ways, and I think both of these guys with this team would definitely help some of the issues that they have offensively.
Yeah, I mean, we've went on record multiple times saying that we would love to bring in a David Njoku, so I'm not going to focus so much on that here. I'm going to focus more so on Evan Engram, the other name that you brought up here. I mean, that's kind of intriguing there. A guy that's on a team that's clearly getting rid of pieces. They're kind of having a fire sale. They're open for business, as they say. 8-year vet here for Evan Engram. Slow start, but last year, I mean, crazy numbers for a tight end. We're talking 114 receptions on 143 targets, 963 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Like, that's insane. That's wide receiver numbers. Like, it's
the second most catches by any NFL tight end in NFL history. In
NFL history, man. That's
only
crazy.
Zach Ertz had 116 one year, but after that, it's Evan Engram, a name maybe you wouldn't expect, is the second most catches in a single season all time.
And they were feeding him. Not so much this year, but you look at the money.
He's been hurt this year too. He's
only played 4 games, but contract $7 million in 2024, obviously aggregated to how many games there are left. The Chargers can make that work. I mean, the year after that, probably going to have to do some maneuvering. $19.7 million on the books. I'll throw out another name that's kind of familiar that may be a little bit of a long shot here, but Hunter Henry, anyone? I mean, I still would love to put Hunter Henry out there, make a trade for him. 32 catches, 358 yards, and a touchdown. Contract is very reasonable. $1.6 million base and $6.6 and $7.15 million the next 2 years after that. So, I mean, a guy you're familiar with, a guy that's a good blocker and a good pass catcher, good route runner. I feel like both those guys could make some sense if the Chargers were to be able to broker a deal.
Yeah, well, let me go back to the Evan Engram part of it, right? Obviously, he's not a guy that's known for his blocking as a tight end. And that was the first thing I was worried about. When Stone Smart's getting snaps, and Hayden Hurst hasn't been able to block this year and hasn't been able to play this year. It doesn't seem like the Chargers are as worried about it, or should be, if they're trying to trade for a pass catching tight end. But the Jags do have Brenton Strange, who's a young up and coming tight end, and maybe they would feel okay going with that. It's a lost season for them at 2-6. But yeah, per at least over the cap, their base salary next year would be $14 million. So would the Chargers want to stomach that? Hard to say. And that's a big number. Obviously, they have a lot of cap space, and we're going to talk about that later in the show, just what they should do with that in the first year that Joe Ortiz is going to have a lot of money to work with. But I do think as far as wide receiver versus tight end, I think the argument for a tight end would be, hey, this is a way to improve your running game and your passing attack.
Yeah.
Like I said, Evan Engram, not known for his run blocking ability, but at least anyone with 40 snaps this year at the tight end position, he actually ranks 5th in run blocking grade. So I was very surprised to see
really
that.
Good.
I think it's probably a mirage, but I think what I'm saying by that is, hey, it's not out of the question that he could be a capable run blocker, right?
Yeah.
I also think the other thing is it would put the need less at wide receiver, because the Chargers could do probably what Greg Roman sees in his dreams at night, which is running with more 2 tight end formations, which lets you do more in the running game. But also, when you go with those big packages now, you actually have legitimate receivers. It's not one wide receiver running around with Scott Matlock and Will Dissly and Eric Tomlinson behind him, right?
Yeah, that's true.
No matter what you're doing out of those sets, it's going to be hard to catch people off guard in the passing game if you don't actually have options when you bring those big packages out there. So I think that's the argument for a tight end over a wide receiver. I think both could help in their own ways. If you're getting the certain type of guys, we would all be a fan of David Njoku. What they do this weekend could have an impact on that, right? They could send the Browns into a spot where they're not really competitive for the playoffs, or at least push them even further out of playoff range after that offense looked good. That game worries me now. Be good to get into for the crossover tomorrow. But let's get to this one last question here from Mike Abduch, who says, what would it take to trade for guard Quentin Nelson? Is that even possible? Probably not. But I think it brings up a good conversation, at least as far as trading for the offensive line. I know that's what everyone wants. Usually we preface every kind of trade talk by saying, hey, if a team is willing to help you improve your interior offensive line and is willing to sacrifice their quarterback by trading a starting offensive lineman, we are in favor of it. It doesn't happen ever, really, right? But Quentin Nelson still playing at a high level. I would be very willing to pay the, $14 and $16 million he's due over the next 2 years, respectively. Guards are making way more than that now, and he's still playing at a high level. But also the Colts just sat Anthony Richardson to start Joe Flacco, and I think telling you, hey, they feel like they're very much in it. They're trying to win now. It wouldn't make any sense for them to trade him.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. 2 games behind the Texans and still within striking distance. That's not happening. I'm sorry. But there is another team that already showed you that they are willing to ship out offensive linemen, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. So looking at the interior of that offensive line, which obviously is the biggest opportunity for the Chargers, there's a couple of names that make a lot of sense. Ezra Cleveland, the guard, 76.2 pass block grade, 64.3 run block grade, very even from both sides there. Brandon Scherff, big money guy, has been in the league for a very, very long time. Always been a very good pass protector. This year, no different. 73.2 pass block grade, 0 sacks allowed, 11.5 million on the cap number. They can make that work. And then Mitch Morse is a guy I've brought up in the past as a stopgap option, and he's been very solid. 64.5 overall, 65.5 pass, 63.6 run block, 1 penalty, couple sacks, 9 pressures. Been pretty solid. I think any of those guys that if you're able to bring them in, they would be able to make an upgrade on your offensive line right away.
Yeah, and as much as everyone loves what Bradley Bozeman, was able to do last week, and I'm right there in number 1 in line for the Bradley Bozeman fan club, it shouldn't stop you from trying to upgrade the center position if it's at all possible. If one of these guys the Jaguars are willing to let go of to give younger guys opportunities in a lost season, I think you jump all over it. I think also you're just looking at base salary, which some of these guys have very reasonable numbers to work with there that the Chargers could absolutely take on the books. So I think with these, if you can find, I didn't think you would see a team trade their starting left tackle. So that kind of gets rid of, us saying, hey, maybe they're not going to just, feed Trevor Lawrence out to the Wolves. And I don't necessarily think they will. I think they'll probably keep most of these guys. But if you can get one of these guys for a day 3 pick to help you this year, you'd be solving one of your biggest issues, or at least going a long way towards solving one of your biggest issues. Hey, 1 out of 3 interior offensive linemen doesn't change everything, But I think you'd be surprised what one good player on the interior and what kind of difference that could make if you know exactly where your problem spots are and you don't have to help other people because you at least have one of those positions figured out. And right now, it doesn't feel like any of the 3 interior spots are figured out or are good enough right now, especially just as far as the communication and just the stunts and the pressures they've been allowing on the inside. So I love Bradley Bozeman, seeing him doing that and what that's meant for the Bradley Bozeman Foundation, David, which you donated to after what he did protecting his quarterback last week. So freaking cool. I'm always going to root for Bradley Bozeman. Has he played well enough? No. But do I want him to get better and hope that he can improve? Absolutely, I do. But we still have more to get into, including some offseason plans. Where should the Chargers be putting their money this offseason? Should it be weapons? Should it be the offensive line? And also, will Kristian Fulton get paid after being one of the best cornerbacks in the year in the NFL so far this year? We're going to talk about all that and more today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell everyone about FanDuel because you can get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, if you live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I love doing live in-game betting. I love getting the flow of a game and seeing which direction it's going before I place my bets. And that's a great way to do it because now I have a place where they're telling you exactly the trends of where everything's going in that game. So the Chargers this weekend, still 2.5-point favorites over the Browns as I'm reading this, took out the Ravens last week. Jameis Winston at quarterback. This is not going to be as easy of a game as we thought it would be 2 weeks ago. This is going to be a tough game for the Chargers and a tough place to play. But FanDuel is telling you they are still favorites going into it, so they need to win it. All you have to do, if you want action on this game, visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. David, it's time to get into more of this Chargers mailbag, and thank you to everyone who hit us up at Locked On LAC. We appreciate all of the everydayers for contributing onto the show, and as always, for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out the new slate at Locked On NFL, where you can get your morning started with Tyler, the madman Rowan, who's even more mad than ever with what this Tennessee Titans season has been, giving you hot takes. You won't need any coffee in the morning to wake up, or kick back with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop, one of my favorites on the network, wherever you get your podcast from, and also on YouTube as well. David, we talked yesterday about Elijah Molden and just how impressive of a signing he has been, but we didn't talk about a lot about Kristian Fulton, because Kristian Fulton has also, as you put it, been a revelation. This is a dude they signed for cheap that they knew from day one not only was going to have to start for them, but potentially had to be their best cornerback. And all he's done is do that so far in 2024. He's been awesome. I think that's what leads to Big Daddy E's question here, saying, question for the mailbag, has Kristian Fulton earned a contract extension? Returning him with heart and still would give us a nice nucleus moving forward, and maybe we can focus on other positions early in the draft. Love the pod. Thanks for the great content. David, what do you think?
I mean, Kristian Fulton's played excellent this season. I mean, a 79.1 overall coverage grade, which has been great. An interception, 11 tackles. But the reception numbers is where it really shines. 9 receptions on 16 targets for only 96 yards total the entire season up to this point for Kristian Fulton, which is just disgustingly good numbers. Like, I don't think anybody would have ever dreamed. And really, the only touchdown he did give up was, the deep ball from Mahomes where he just kind of chucked it, to Xavier Worthy, and he ran under it for the touchdown. But the big problem for Kristian Fulton, it's the injuries. And unfortunately, the last couple of weeks, he's been in and out of the lineup, trying to deal with that hamstring injury, an injury that has plagued him in the past. So hopefully this is not a situation that forces him to miss significant time, because availability is one of the best abilities out there. I will say it ad nauseum because it is true. And for Kristian Fulton, if he wants to earn that next contract, half a season is not going to be good enough to be able to convince somebody to go out there and give you a multi-million-dollar deal. You got to go do it for the majority of the season. Hopefully Kristian Fulton is able to do so.
Yeah, a multi-year contract extension, I think, is what you mean, right? I mean,
yes.
It's It's hard because the thing is, David, is you have to give him credit because he's toughed it out and he's played in every
Yeah.
single game this year. I think the problem is the troubling trend, right? Because he only played 33 combined snaps against Denver and Arizona, and then the last game he had to leave the game with an injury. So we'll see what the ramifications of that are. But out of all the 201 graded cornerbacks this year, he ranks 10th. He's been awesome. He's been a true legit top 10 corner in the league so far this year. If you could add that with Tarheeb still and Cam Harden, you have the confidence that he can stay healthy.
I love it.
You have to do it, right? Especially if, he's not playing a lot right now in and out of the lineup. Who knows what that does to his potential value. But right now, if he keeps playing this way, he's going to be really expensive. If you don't have the confidence that you can, keep him healthy throughout a full season, then it's hard to give him the big money that he's probably going to want and absolutely should ask for because he's been great. And then it becomes how much do you have faith in Joe Ortiz to go find the next Kristian Fulton, to go find the next Elijah Molden, give Jesse Minter a guy that he can work with and let him raise that man's value by a ton. But let's get to Athir, because when Athir calls in, we're going to get to him. And Athir has some off-season questions for us as well. Let's hear what he has.
My question is, we're going to have the money in the offseason. What is the top priority for this team? Get big time weapon for Herbert, tight end, and wide receiver, or address the offensive line? The interior offensive line, sorry. Love you. Let me hear you.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, big weapon or address the offensive line. David, where would you go?
Well, the last time I wanted a wide receiver, the Chargers told me that they wanted an offensive lineman. They told everybody that they wanted an offensive lineman, and guess what they did? Yeah. They got an offensive lineman. So I'm not going to go against the grain again. I'm just going to believe what the Chargers organization is telling me, and that means that they want to build up and beef up the offensive line. I fully expect them to go spend big money to bring in a qualified center, guard, anybody in the interior. We saw how impactful it was to have a premier center in the league, and when it was not the case, when he wasn't on the field with Corey Linsley. Corey Linsley made a world of difference. Imagine what a prime Corey Linsley would look like in the middle of this offensive line right here. How many problems that would solve. That right there tells me they are not done with the investments on the offensive line. And yes, they got a lot of money to be able to do it in this offseason.
I think the problem is with adding a weapon is like, who's the wide receiver one that's going to be available to you?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you who the top wide receivers available are right now in 2025. It's T. Higgins, who we talked about, assuming he doesn't get a deal from the Bengals. And if he was going to, you'd think it would happen. But that means there's really one legit young wide receiver one type of guy that's going to be available, and let the arms race begin, or let that, whoever's going to want to pay him $30 million begin, because it doesn't seem like that's going to be a guy who's going to take a discount by any means, right? And he's not going to have a lot of competition. Not gonna have a lot of competition, because the next guys on that list are guys like Chris Godwin, who is a great receiver, but also just dislocated his ankle. And then you have, Amari Cooper, who I loved for the Chargers as a potential trade. But part of the thing I loved about that was them actually getting a chance to have half a season or more than that to be able to see how he fits in the offense.
Without having to pay him the big money.
I don't know what he's going to want, right? And I don't know how much I'd be willing to pay him. So it's not a loaded free agent class in wide receivers. If you have great wide receivers, you usually re-sign them. So I don't think it's as simple as, hey, just go wait till the offseason. You can sign a wide receiver one in free agency. There has to be guys out there to go get. And I'm not even sure T. Higgins is a guy that I want to be wrapping all of that up in, or taking that big of a risk on. So guards out there, interior offensive linemen, there is a guy like a Trey Smith you could potentially steal from the Chiefs, who's been awesome in his career so far. There's a guy like Zach Martin. If you're looking for a shorter term fix, a guy that's still playing really well at his age, you could find those next year. So they're going to have options. And I'll tell you one thing, David, I want to have at least two of those three positions figured out going into the draft, because having any more than that and expecting to get that filled by a rookie is really hard to imagine right now. And I think too much to ask of any rookie. So to me, that's where it's at. Hey, you have all this cap space. You better get two of those figured out. And I'm not talking about bargain contracts, right? You guys you feel really, really good about, because first of all, Trey Pipkins and Bradley Bozeman are going to be free agents. They're not part of the plans right now in 2025. And Zion Johnson, they will not going to pick up his fifth round option, at least. Fifth year option. I don't think that's getting picked up, which means he's going to be going into the last year of his contract too, and also just hasn't played well enough to feel like having him as your starting left guard is you having figured out how to protect Justin Herbert the best.
True.
And that's how I see it. Like, you're going to have to address it. So, David, for me, it's 2 out of 3 of those better be signed before you go into the draft.
Yeah, you absolutely have to. I don't think you can go into the draft needing those positions. We've seen that in the past where the Chargers have pigeonholed themselves into having to get a particular position and lucking into a player that might be able to fix that problem.
Yeah.
You can't go into the draft expecting that to be the case. So you got the
Tom
money.
Telesco did it way too many times, David, where
Way
we
too
knew
many
exactly
times.
who he was going to pick because he had such glaring holes that he had to take guys early in the draft because you knew they were going to have to start. That's what you're trying to avoid with Joe Ortiz, right?
Period.
Yeah, so I mean that's where it is, right? And we had another question from Seth who was basically asking, hey, do you go out there and find new guys, or do you spend all that money you have next year on guys like Poona Ford, Tier Tart, Elijah Molden, Kristian Fulton, maybe even J.K. Dobbins? That's another big part of this, is it looks like it's a big number, but if you want to bring back these guys who have been key contributors for you this year, it's going to put a big dent into that. What you also have is what me and David have talked about many times is you probably have Joey Bosa coming off the books. So that's going to open up another 25 plus million in salary cap space, putting them over $100 million in salary cap space.
Yeah.
I'm very excited and anxious and interested to see how Joe Ortiz approaches that because the Ravens are not a team that's known for giving out giant contracts. That's a lot of money that can be able to be spent. And we're very scarred from big deal contracts and pretty much any big deal that was done in the Tom Telesco era. But I will say this, you have needs at defensive tackle, cornerback, guard, center, tight end, wide receiver, and edge, because you might not have Khalil Mack next year. I'm bringing back Khalil Mack even at his age, and that's one of my priorities for sure, and then figure out the rest of it. But it's extend Rashawn Slater, re-sign Khalil Mack, re-sign guys like Elijah Molden and Kristian Fulton if they're in your future plans. And then with what you have left, I'm throwing that at the interior of the offensive line and trying to find weapons if they're out there. But right now, I just don't see it. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. The good news is it's crossover Thursday tomorrow, which means Locked On Browns, Locked On Chargers. A game I thought was going to be easy is not going to be easy anymore. And I'm excited to talk about this matchup that seems like it's going to be a very good game now. To make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free in the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as hitting us up at Locked On LAC, where everyone did for the Chargers Mailbag today on Twitter, where we post the show as well, and at Locked On Chargers on Instagram and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But it's crossover Thursday, one of the best days, definitely my favorite day of the week. So make sure you guys are back here with us tomorrow. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.